Live. What's up, everybody? It's G Mr. Drew here to welcome you to another episode of the Glowczewski Experience. This is going to be episode 190. Look at that, man. We're damn near 200 episodes. We're still sitting on this continent. We're still working on characters, environments, and props from this same old continent from, how far back? Look how many pages ago this was, man. I've gone through pages upon pages. And I'm only like halfway through this continent. Not even, because if we count everything going on over here, you know, I wonder if I'm even halfway through it. I've done so much, as far as like all the studies go and everything like that. So yeah, this is super exciting, man. Coming up on 200, and yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we're still sitting here when I hit 250, episode 250. I mean. That might be a stretch, but hey, it is what it is. It goes to let you know how much has gone into. Well, I took the 5 years off of doing art to write a story, and hell of a story. And yeah, I think it's beginning to show. Like I haven't been able to really quantify it or evaluate it or anything like that. I kind of just do what I do. Just as I go through these streams, I kind of just figure it out as I go. Same thing when I was writing, because I especially didn't know what I was doing when I was writing because I don't know how to write. Um, so yeah, man, I'm super excited about all this. I love all this. The more I look at it, the more I wonder, am I spending too much time on this? But at the same time, it's like, well, who cares what I'm drawing? You know? And at the end of the day, it was really to make a Cyclops work. And this is a big character. And I'm trying to, more than just work on character, work on the world and the world building, and just even for myself to understand all the concepts completely that I'm working on. I know I don't give away too much about the story or anything like that. That's going to come when the manga comes and when I start actually illustrating these things. Uh, so, obviously I'm not going to sit there and talk about it in too much depth, but I get little nuggets here and there. So yeah, let's just get into it, man. Episode 190 going to continue. It's going to be the last drawing I do on this page. I still have another one. I'm going to be sitting on this character for a while because not only is it the portraits, but it's also the clothing. And at least I have like jackets and shirts and things like that in here, fashion here for, when I do the clothing bits. I'm really just going to be pulling from my imagination from what these like coats and jackets and shirts give me. You know what I mean? Other than that, I'm really not going to be pushing it too hard, too much. Um, Maybe give him like different levels, because he's probably not wearing a jacket every day. So maybe sometimes whenever I work on the clothing, it's going to be like, oh, just sometimes a shirt or sometimes whatever. Either way, uh, figure that out when I get to it. Um, but yeah, man, I think I'm really digging this whole process. I have David Finch's painting going on in the background. It's a continuation from before. It's 2 hours in to a 3 hour video, so there's about an hour left. And then some Loki stuff. And then some, like a Japan documentary. How Japan became a great power in only 40 years. I probably already watched that one once before, but, I'm such a huge fan of Japanese culture. And, you know, it'd actually be interesting to see because you know, we all have like some sort of understanding of history and things like that sometimes, but there's like some gaps of knowledge that we all have, and well, that'd be one of mine is in between going from the feudal Japan that we know about to Japan that when it became what westernized, is that what we want to call it? I don't know. So yeah, how they how they rose to power from there. And well, whatever. We'll get to that when we do. So let's just rock, man. Let me adjust this camera.
Painting, and the paint that you've mixed is enough to get everything you wanted to get.
There we go.
Yeah, yeah. That normally happens with the washes that I do.
Here's the reference that I'm working from.
Looks all
Shitty phone screen.
One of the washes, you know, when at the end when you fill in the background.
Evil One says he wants to meet the art teacher that failed me. Yeah, well, you know what? I hate her. I'm not gonna lie. Not get along with my art teacher. I'm so laid back now, generally. You know, I was much worse than I was here. And that's how it goes. And I thought he was full. And you know what? I still think he's full. So there you go. I was not a good art student.
Cyclops says, I am an art teacher. That's funny.
You know, and I'll tell you what, I've met art teachers since then that have been great. And I've seen work from students from, you know, teachers will come to conventions and they'll say, this is the work that, you know, a particular student is doing in their class and it's amazing and they're fostering it and, you know, encouraging it. And I think that's great. So yeah, here's me bashing teachers and I apologize. I didn't like my teacher.
Next you'll say, I was your teacher.
Yeah. So I'm just going in with my kind of final layer of lighting on my main figure, and I'm just putting in some highlights. And so I know my lighting is really hitting at this angle. I don't think you really see my hand that well, but it's hitting really where the light is focused. And so what I'm doing is I'm putting a highlight exactly where the form is kind of touching the light. Or at least as close as I can manage, because these aren't 3D models, so there's a certain amount of user error.
There we go.
Someone says, hey Dave, did you prime your paper with something before starting your painting? I did not, no. It's just 400 series Strathmore multimedia paper. And no, because I'm using acrylic, I don't really feel any need to prime. If I was using oil, I would definitely want to prime it. But acrylic, for me, is fine. Like I never have any trouble anyway. If there is an advantage to priming, I don't know what that would be. But that's not to say that, you know, it's a bad thing. I just don't know. And, you know, make it for failing art school.
First day would have been how to prime. stuff you're painting? Old paper.
Yeah, you know what? It really was not though. That's the problem. You know, I say this all about art school, but for the most part, unless I had gone to Art Center in Pasadena or a school like that, I really wasn't getting the kind of education that would help me with the music, truthfully. So I didn't miss that. I'm hitting it like a wrecking ball with my paint right now a little bit. Slow down. And I love that the more I do this, I'm starting to learn what edges I can hit that will really, really sharpen a picture
Mm-hmm.
and what I can leave soft. And that, if there's a way to like speed that process up, I don't know what it is, but definitely doing a few paintings over a few months, like it's getting, I feel better with it, you know?
Your edge control and stuff.
Yeah, just like
Yeah.
hitting things and it just, it pops and it works. And, you know, you do that a few times and it starts to feel easier, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can start drawing on at certain places because of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I've got to that point. You know, one thing at a time.
Playing with fire over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm using this wash brush to cut into corners where I shouldn't be.
Oh, why not?
Oh no, like that. No.
Oh, I should be laughing. I'm sorry. I wasn't looking, so it's not like I was laughing and looking. I was more laughing at your pain. So I apologize.
Yeah, I'm gonna mess up his chin. I'll have to fix that.
Oh, I'm going pretty white with this, and then I'm just kind of. I don't know if that's really the right way to go, but I'm doing it. Seems like it's kind of working. I think.
All right. That ain't right. Here we go. Round 2. There we go.
Yeah, I think the reason why I'm starting so much with this one is really think it came down to my wash again. Very first wash is so important. Just wasn't dark enough.
You still at any point could just get your big huge brush and do
Nice glaze.
yeah.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
Now the risk of doing that, of course, is you put yourself in a position where you bring your values together so much that you're like starting again. So
Right, exactly, yeah.
I can totally feel myself put my finger right or my hand right on what I just painted.
Yeah, I did that too earlier. I'm gonna do it now, actually.
On purpose?
No.
Okay. All right, so I'm just going ahead and establishing in my room light. And then I kind of have it just a little bit, but it's very messy. This is just colored pencil, so I'm just going to go ahead and clean that up. And water my brush is a little hard. You guys can see what I'm doing here. Yeah, just kind of throwing this in. That contrast hopefully will really kind of bring some of this together. I can also really clean up some of my edges this way. So I kind of didn't worry too much about some of this being a little chalky and messy, just because I knew that I would have the opportunity to go in here and clean it. Just with a simple light. And so probably actually that colored pencil that I put on originally was a waste of time. There you go. Whatever.
There's a comment I have to find here. And Anthony, I thought the punchline was going to be different. The coloring on Eric's has me picturing Christian Bale's Batman if he was in those 1940s Batman films, kind of a sepia tone.
Yeah.
Yeah. On our practice stream, when the burnt sienna started coming out, the contrast of the dark against the cool and the burnt sienna, I really enjoyed it. So, try to kind of do the same thing here. Was more of a happy little accident, as Bob Ross would say, than anything else. Wasn't intentional.
Happy accidents.
Dave, I love your painting streams. Do you think it's possible to achieve the same result as you by using watercolor and colored pencils instead of acrylics?
It would be a different. You could achieve yes and no. The look of different paint is always going to be just a little bit different. So that's a fact or a factor or whatever. Anyway, but yeah, absolutely, you certainly can. I personally struggle mightily with watercolor. It's very difficult for me. It's a more unforgiving medium, I find. So if you're comfortable with it, I say absolutely use.
All right, let's keep going.
I'm gonna have to remove this. I'm gonna mess up bad if I don't turn this paper around. It's a glass table, so you might see my feet.
Background looks good.
Thank you.
I'm gonna have to get mine in there at some point.
Yeah, I figure I'll throw it in and I should be able to fix some tonality.
All right, I'm just about wrapped up with most of this picture here.
What you gonna do for a background? Actually, are you gonna keep it like that? Actually, looks legit like that. Are you gonna change the tone or?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I'm gonna do some stuff. But right now, I just want to kind of darken this hand just a little bit. It's like pure water. Hold on. Try that again. Again, like pure water. What's going on?
I'm sorry.
Talking to myself.
Okay.
Why didn't I just get this brush out earlier? I don't know. No excuse. That's easier. Trying to wash this stuff in with a tiny little brush like an idiot.
I was an idiot.
Gerald Lang says you wouldn't touch the background.
I know that is really good that way.
Okay, well, if Jared Lang, by the
Yeah.
way, Lang is not a painter, for those of you guys that don't know, says leave the background alone, that's what I'm going to do. I'll leave it alone. I'm 29. That was great. I'm trying to paint on top of a wet surface here.
Oh yeah, that's fraught with peril, huh?
It is, and even though I know that, I haven't stopped listening. Going. This is why my paintings fall apart. Lack of patience. I gotta stop. This is stupidity. I'm stopping. Try. What am I doing? Uh-oh.
Sure.
Just rubbed off some of my paper. All right.
Oh no. Some of your you picked up some of the acrylic or the paper itself?
Oh, the paper is kind of wet, and I was rubbing it, and it rubbed the actual paper right off.
Oh, you can put some medium on it and then paint over it again.
Oh. Now it just looks like okay, it looks like a mistake.
Yeah, put some medium on it. Kind of fill the cavity a bit and then.
Kazoo says, Dave, no. Yeah, I know. Oh well. You know, that might end up having to paint the background anyway. We'll see. I'm gonna try and rescue it.
Nah, my background tonality is too close to his highlights. Boo.
Russ, if the live without a net is great to watch. Thank you, Russ.
What are you saying?
Russ is enjoying watching me splat. I think that's what he's saying.
Oh, that meant, yeah.
John said to Dave, back away from the painting slowly and carefully. You're not engaged with the paint anymore. You know what? I'm almost done. I just have a little bit of stuff to fix now. Those are my famous last words. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna leave his face alone for now. Oh, am I though? Yeah. No. Going for it again. Oh, see, now it's working. There you go.
Background giving me fits. I'm gonna stop. Okay. So now I have to watch over Batman one more time. What were you saying?
I was gonna say, I feel like it's fair to say that we both have struggled with this more than our practice version.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's just how it goes. You do.
Yeah, Peggy's got a way of reminding you sometimes that you don't, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah. You're not in charge.
wait, do you think you have it, huh? And it's like, yeah. Yeah, the whole day I was like, yeah, this one should be a whole, very
Oh,
nice.
yeah. No problem. Cut this down.
Ariel made you nervous. You made me nervous.
Yep. And like I said, this is what I'm talking about when I say, yeah, I don't know how to paint. Because it's true. I don't know how to paint. You know? I mean, sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. I'm not terrible. I think it's all right.
Yeah, I would say yours is very good. Definitely more than alright, that's for sure. I'm curious if Ariel's still around. Haven't looked at the chat in a while.
Dude, I feel like my blue LEDs have been like pretty
Neil,
dead
Neil Wilson?
lately.
Says Dave, you're a sculptor. Thank you so much. Airline says, I would add a barge boss way over side of Dave's Batman as a cast shadow of Batman on the concrete wall behind him. the right side. So do you mean the right side of the picture or the right side, like here or here? Marvin said, "Get a better brain or carbon black hair that looks to have filters." What kind of, you're using Liquitex?
Ivory. I'm sorry?
You're using Liquitex, like the good stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, it really isn't bad. Yeah, it might just be the black that I'm using that doesn't, the coverage, I don't know.
I don't know.
What if I should glaze over him one more time, David?
Gino says, "Dave, how can you possibly say you don't know how to paint? It looks fantastic and very realistic." Thank you so much, Gino. Really, thank you. This is, I love painting. It's hard. Chris Carter says, "Great stuff, guys. Do you sell these paintings after you're finished?" Yeah, you know what? We're actually gonna, now we've talked about this because part of the thing that's making it possible for me to be able to paint is the idea that Meredith, my wife, for those of you guys that don't watch the Monday night stream, she does the Monday night stream with me. She expects me to be able to sell at least, some of them. She's hoping, because I'm spending a lot of time on them. So yeah, we're gonna put them up on the website. Is what I'm saying. Long story short. So what I'm doing right now, I'm just softening things up with a little bit of white pencil. I just find that when everything is pretty close, like this little white area is a little harsh, I can just kind of soften it out just a little bit. I need to not get too carried away, but I can get just a little bit of softness from the pencil. And even just a little bit of texture, which I kind of like. And this is where I can also, and I said this earlier on, but I can get quite a bit of edge control using the colored pencils. And so just going in here now, it's really possible for me to take advantage of the property of the pencil to be able to just shore some of that stuff up just a little bit. I feel like you got a little narrow in this area here. I went too light, too low, and so it flattened his chest down just a little bit. I'm gonna try and just hopefully subtly see if I can make this just a little fix out of it.
There we go. Start cleaning up these edges a little bit.
And Children says, "You gotta pay for Meredith's horses and chickens somehow." Yeah, that's for sure. Red Cat Studio says, "I just saw Mike." I lost it. Hold on. I just saw Mike Mayhew's version of Stephen Platt's Moon Knight 55 from Moon Knight #1. Check it out, David. Oh, let's take a look. Yeah. On Spotler says, "How is Alex Ross better than this?" Yeah, let me tell you the ways. I mean, really, thank you. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate the thought, but yeah.
That'll be a whole separate stream.
Yeah, the stream where I try and claim to be better than Alex Ross. paper towel?
Yes. I missed. I got medium all over this bottle, so.
I thought that's either paper towel or a very dry fart.
You know what? I was thinking to myself, I better just announce to the world here that that was a paper towel.
Okay.
I was like, surely folks wouldn't think, you know, the whole thinking you're not live thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Sheldon Martin. He said he thought it was.
So I'm running back here really quickly. I want to Sheldon, or I'm sorry, not Sheldon Martin. Sheldon. Uh, oh. Uh, Gerald Lang had a suggestion about background. Seeing if he was going to clarify. I'm not seeing it. We'll leave it for now.
Man, I'm on the struggle bus right now. It's weird. The minute I added the background, all the values just died. I'm gonna have to go in with black here.
I think it gets it really easy for you to look at, because I think it actually looks pretty good. I like the values. I think the values actually really work. So McCarthy's gonna go to bed. Looks so sick, David there. Thank you so much for the compliment you gave. Batman is so much better than mine. Have a fantastic night, you all. Thank you so much for staying up as long as you could with us. It's starting to get a little bit late, 10:43. We're getting a little late. Eric's feeling the pressure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really though, I think it's actually. I think you actually with your painting got a little bit like I did with the drawing. I don't know that this is, like the greatest thing I ever painted. I'm happy with it though. But yeah, I feel like you froze up a little bit this time.
Yeah.
Because it looks good. So when I say you froze up, I don't mean like it came up out of it. I just think you're doubting it.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Because I think it looks good.
I understand. Trust the process, Eric. Yes, you have to.
There we go. Yes, sir. Okay.
So you're about done, Dick?
Yeah, I'm gonna call that one done. Except, I'm just gonna end up sitting here staring at it and fixing stuff as I go along. But whatever. Mostly done. Mostly.
About there. But
And Liesl Huddleston says, I almost want to see David add colored pencils in the background. No. And again, I keep forgetting what I do. Don't rush. You're fine. Really. Don't rush.
Mhm.
Actually read the questions, which it's very difficult to keep up with them when I'm working.
Yeah.
There you go. There's a little bit of colored pencil in the background. All right. That's going to be it for mine. Aside from maybe me staring at it and going, oh no, fixing something like those notes right here.
He keeps fucking with his nose.
And oh yeah, now it's going to be constant. It's going to be constant. Me just going in and going, oh no, you can fix that. Fix that.
Excuse me.
I try to remind myself though, this is the difference between a sketch and something I have more time on. It's just that refinement.
Right.
Sometimes refining things doesn't make it better.
Yeah, that's why I just kind of work and move on, work and move on. I'm not in love with everything that I do, you know? But I've been at it long enough to know, like, okay, I just need to let go of this one. Let it rock. Just do better next time, right?
And Dan G says, it looks awesome, Dave. Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate it. Henry Jeremy says, how about painting Bruce Lee? You know what? That is a good suggestion because we're really, the biggest struggle for me is skin tones. And obviously Bruce Lee's got the black pants with the no shirt. So, it'd actually be a pretty good one to try and paint. El Padrino says, masterpiece. Thank you so much, El Padrino. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Dylan Cersei. Nick from Detroit says, I don't know, I liked Bruce Lee on Green Hornet as Kato. I didn't like when they fought with Batman and Robin. I have no idea what you're talking about, Nick. Bruce Lee and Kato. For me, Bruce Lee is always Enter the Dragon. I remember I was a kid, and my mother let me stay up late. I wasn't allowed to watch TV when I was a kid. And so, yeah, that was like a big deal. And it was like a violent movie. Oh, yeah. Changed my life. Geraldine says each painting is really nice and have their own character and dynamic that's going on. Gotta run, take it easy. Thank you so much, Gerald, for coming and spending time with us. I really appreciate it.
What time are we in?
We're at 10:49, so we're not bad. We're doing all right. Honest Battler says, hey, Dave Finch, tell us where this painting is less than ideal, please. Honest Battler, I know that it is less than ideal. If I could tell you, I would fix it. This is the problem. It's so much of not doing the greatest kind of artwork in the world that you would like to be doing is just you do your best. If I knew how to make it better, I would.
Okay.
Russick says, these look amazing, gentlemen. Thank you. Fantastic work. Thank you so much. And Lazel Huddleston said, this went faster than last time in the process. It was much more refined. Nice work. Thank you so much. Yeah, it is definitely going faster. Eric's, I think yours is looking really, really good. I really think that you got it in your head, and not in the picture work that looks good. You just, look, you know what? I mean, I'm just as bad. It's tough doing this in front of a lot of people. Something that neither of us are experts at. So
Yeah. It's a bit scary for sure.
It really is. I have so much fun doing this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jasmine Alice says, what kind of paper is that? My paper is Strathmore.
All right, here we go. Got some
It's
colors
media
ready to color it.
pound paper, and Eric's is Strathmore acrylic paper.
Yeah.
And using the textured side. It comes with two sides. One side is more textured than the other. One side is really the side you're supposed to be painting on. It's got a bit of a faux canvas texture, and it really works nicely with paint. Lance Boy says, this went so much better than my Captain America last time. I learned a lot. You know what, Lance? I'm really looking forward to seeing what you did with it.
Yeah, definitely put it up and tank.
Yep. Everyone has a $2 super chat that says, getting better every time. Love the lighting, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And SDA says, hi, David. Hi, SDA. Golden Wall says, you should do He-Man for another heavy skin tone character. Yeah, you know what? We did actually do He-Man. That was our painting that we did 2 weeks ago. It's on my Instagram. You can find stuff on it.
He did a He-Man? How did I miss that?
Nino98 says, thank you so much, Dave, for this awesome stream. They really make my day. Thank you very much. Yeah, you know, there are times I wish we could just do this every day. But, you know, we actually have jobs. And, you know, I love my job. But there are often times when I wish I could just have been a painter. You know, certainly feel a lot better at it by now. Al Padrino says, also, I can't wait for that Kevin Nolan video, Dave. He's my favorite artist. Well, there you go. Eric, we're locked in.
Yeah, definitely need to do that.
Yeah. Angie says, there's no way I'm posting this train wreck, LOL. You know what, Dan? I showed you guys my Conan picture. That was a train wreck. And yeah, there are times it's just not going to come together. It's totally all right. It's the process. I mean, if you don't want to show it, it's fine, but I think you should. Tom Morris is posting mine on Finchblock Facebook. That's great. Yeah, you know what? Meredith will end up showing you. Meredith is on Facebook all the time. I never am, but I'm kind of in effect on Facebook all the time because she's always showing me stuff. So I'm sure I will see it tomorrow. Quentin Bauer has a $4.99 super chat. Thank you so much. He says, great job to the both of you. Damn. David, what pencils did you use to draw this? I used, you can see all the paint all over my hands. I used Prismacolor Premiere. So this is white. I used black. It's a new pencil too. Not new today, but new this week. Not gonna last much longer. And I have a gray one. I used a 30% gray. It's actually a warm gray.
Damn.
They had, when I bought these, I just bought a bunch of each. I didn't even pay attention to whether it was warm or cool. So I guess I should try cool one too. Joey Turner says, fantastic work, gents. Could you guys recap your paints again really quick? Yeah, absolutely. I use carbon black. This is golden fluid. All my paint that I'm using is fluid acrylic. That's really the only common factor for me. Eric is using...
yeah, I'm using titanium white Liquitex.
Yeah, heavy body.
Yeah, heavy body. Ivory black. And then burnt sienna.
Burnt sienna, right.
And the only ones used, yeah.
And you'll notice Eric's has a slightly more orange overtone, mine has a slightly more brown tone. And that's really the difference between burnt umber and burnt sienna. I just couldn't find my burnt sienna. So it really makes no difference to the finished painting, though. It just gives it a slightly different tone. And Eric really actually, and I think it might be your carbon black, or you're using
ivory.
I need to get some ivory black because that really looks fluid.
Yeah, it really goes blue.
I think part of that is the orange undertone. It's very strong orange, or it really makes it look strong with that. But ivory black gives you a really good blue, and there's no blue in that picture. That's entirely just the contrast with the warms that are underneath it. And my black is definitely nowhere near as pronounced in terms of the blue that it gives you. So I need to get some ivory black and give that a try.
All right, Dave, I'm about done. I'm just going to do this really briefly.
Sweaty Stoner says, Eric nailed that still protector Batman pose. Thanks so much, guys.
Jim Klein, it's too easy to just keep noodling with things. Amen.
Is
El Padrino, Ariel told me on his Discord that he was very honored when when you watched the first painting stream, and you said you were a fan of his.
Yeah, well, absolutely. We both are. For a long, long time. Um, he's incredible, and he's an incredible painter. He's an incredible uh, black and white artist, and he's also really great at um, digital art, from colors to inks, the whole works. He really does it all. Honest Battler, mine is not Mars Black, it's Carbon Black. So yeah, burn over Carbon Black, and my white is just the same as Eric's. I'm just using a soft body. I want to get some heavy body and give it a try. So Eric really swears by him right now, and have been working well for him. So
Yeah, the heavy body actually. You can see I got a little bit of matte medium there, and even that little bit just helps so much. That at first I was kicking myself for buying it, but
oh, you guys want to see a mess? Look at this. There's my
Goddamn phone.
is that your porcelain palette?
No, it's just a piece of paper. It's just it's my
Okay.
comic book board.
Yeah, so I use just paper plates, which is pretty sweet. I can just stack them when I'm done and toss it.
Yeah, well, using paper is a mistake because
Here
it soaks
we
into the paper.
go.
But once you have enough paint mixed on there, nothing's soaking into that. So I think I'm gonna use this for the rest of my life. It looks kind of like my desk. I just keep a white piece of paper underneath what I'm working on. You can see this is actually my backdrop from Monday night's stream. But under that is my desk, which is covered in paint splatter and stuff just from years of abuse.
Yours is like a 3D model, eh?
Thank you, Eric. And I apologize. Ojaz, Alero says, hello, Mr. Finch. It is morning here and have my online class, so I had to finish it fast. I have mailed it to you. Please take a look at it. All right, I can find it. Thank you.
There's one.
Richard M8422 says, David's palette would sell for $500,000 in a spiky auction. Yeah, there you go, Eric. Neither of us need to work again. Throw away the painting, we'll sell the palette.
All right, I'm stopping. I'm gonna keep noodling away here.
All right.
That was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that was an absolute blast. I see John Jeremy Villanova is saying Paint Spawn. That would be a lot of fun. I think that's something we should try at some point. It is nice to get a break from trying to get skin colors working, let me tell you. All right, well, while Eric signs his, I'm going to say to everyone that came out, we had a bit of an earlier night, so hopefully it's a little easier on you guys in the morning. Thank you so much for coming and spending Thursday night with us this time. This is the first of some more, I guess, process and art related streams that Eric and I will be doing over the course of the summer while Meredith is out busy wrangling horses. So next week, Eric and I will be doing a stream on Kevin Nolan, breaking down his style, doing some sketches, copying his work, closing the book, and trying to draw it ourselves to see what we can get from it. I really enjoy doing that. I feel like it's the best way to learn and improve is doing art studies of other artists, and then trying to draw
Absolutely.
yourself and see how much you get from it. It really, really works for me. So I hope you guys will enjoy that next time. And thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us this time. Eric, you want to say something?
Yeah, just again had an absolute blast, and yeah, really looking forward to seeing everyone's work. And yeah, thanks again, Dave, for having me. Absolute fun time for sure.
Yeah, it always is. Thank you so much, Eric. All right, good night, everybody. We will see you. Sorry, Eric.
No, I just said good night to everyone. Sorry.
All right, good night.
Let's see. Loki episode 4. Easter eggs
What's
and
going on,
breakdowns.
guys? Welcome to Everything Always. My name's Michael Roman, aka Allfires. Now, hopefully, you've had a chance to watch Loki episode 4. If not, spoiler warning, we're going to break down everything in this episode, including both the post-credit scene and what happened at the end. We'll explain what I think is going on at the ending. We're also going to talk about how that ties directly to the post-credit scene. There might have been some sleight of hand going on here. I'm going to point to exactly what I think that is. We also have to talk about a ton of parallelism showing up multiple times throughout this episode. An episode aptly named The Nexus Event, referring to both what was going on with Sylvie and, of course, the love moment between Loki and himself. So weird, so awesome. This episode was amazing. We're breaking down everything. What you missed, Easter eggs, the post-credit scene, the ending, and, of course, where this left us going into the final 2 episodes of Loki on Disney+. But first, if you could grab the subscribe button, we're still giving away a PlayStation 5, now at 900,000 subscribers. Disney Plus subscriptions will actually announce a new winner for that at the end of this, and this amazing Avengers 118 graded in a 9.4 CGC signature series signed by Loki himself, Tom Hiddleston, and Scarlet Witch Elizabeth Olsen to boot. If you want to be entered to win the subscriptions, this insane comic, or the PlayStation, or any of the future giveaways, all the same rules will always apply. Just make sure to hit the subscribe button to be a subscriber, and then leave a comment down below. If you want, stick around to the end of the video. We'll get into all the giveaway stuff again there and announce a brand new Disney Plus subscription winner. Okay, so much like last week's Easter egg video, this one needs a disclaimer as well. I'm on record here at the channel saying I like my Easter egg videos like I like the episode or movie. I want it sequential. However, this episode was so tied to itself all over the place. Earlier parts of the episode referencing the end and the post-credit scene, the end and post-credit scene making callbacks to the beginning of the episode. That was the parallelism I was referring to in the prologue of mine. It's impossible to go sequential throughout this without talking about that end post-credit scene, what could be going on throughout the episode. So I'm going to do my best not to go on tangents and get ahead of myself and see what I did there. However, it's going to be impossible. We're just going to try to tie it together all at the end when we finally get there. Now, at the opening, the sort of prologue to this episode that takes place between the previous Leon and the black and white Loki card, we get the introduction of our variant Sylvie's origin story in the MCU, what was going on while she was taken by the TVA, and her unique connection to Ravonna Renslayer. So in case you missed it, Ravonna Renslayer, now the judge who's in charge of all of this, is the hunter that shows up in that scene to grab this variant Sylvie. And then we see Sylvie go through the exact same thing that Loki went through in episode 1, except from a child's point of view, this is a lot scarier, and she is completely unaware of what's going on. She didn't grab any sort of tesseract and skedaddle, realize that something weird happened. Remember in episode 1 of this whole series, they told us sometimes variants don't even know that they just created a Nexus event. It just sort of happens. So now we understand clearly Sylvie's full motivation and vendetta against the TVA. She was simply being a kid, not trying to steal any Infinity Stones or anything of the like, when she was all of a sudden seized as a prisoner by the TVA. We also start to understand Ravonna Renslayer's obsession and frustration with this particular variant in Sylvie, as after her introduction to the TVA, she's able to think on her feet, grab a temp pad from Ravonna Renslayer, and peace out. We then learned in further discourse a couple of scenes later what was going on in that event. Now she decided to live her life and grow up, as she said in the Apocalypse of 1,000 Worlds. But in the meantime, we skip to the TVA, where Ravonna Renslayer has taken the elevator to the top to see the timekeepers, who at this point we didn't even know were real. We were kind of questioning whether they even existed or not. It turns out they do, but they're not real. They're animatrons. That's exposed later in the episode. We'll talk about that when we get to that scene. In the meantime, the trepidation that you can read on Ravonna Renslayer's face is because it was just established that this variant Loki Sylvie that's causing all of these problems was her mistake in the first place. So that's what you see on her face as she approaches the timekeepers, most likely for her admonishment. Now, in a couple of scenes that sandwich the next reference to a Nexus event in that love moment between the two Lokis, which we're about to get to, you start to see it unraveling at the TVA. Mobius is questioning Ravonna Renslayer. You then have Hunter B-15 questioning Mobius about Hunter C-20, most specifically because she remembers the enchantment herself. She probably wants to talk to Hunter C-20 and figure out if they have anything in common or what happened. They can talk about their experiences. He has to hide from her that she's been deceased, that he learns from Ravonna Renslayer, but he doesn't quite buy that, because even though she was a little shook up, as he puts it, she shouldn't have been killed. So all of the paranoia that's starting to set in, that was literally the words used in the official synopsis for this episode, you can see it starting to unravel with certain members of the TVA. And I want to get back to a certain line from Mobius when he was talking about that jet ski for the very first time, I believe in episode 2. His language was very peculiar because he points to a jet ski as the perfect marriage of form and function, but then also says that he's happy to be born into his form and function in the TVA, when really those are opposite images. And we've talked about this, right? There's a paradox there. A jet ski is a symbol of freedom. You can go anywhere and do anything on open water, except the TVA stands for predeterminism and nobody being free at all. They're literally the antithesis.
In a happy body. That's joking.
That revealed something about Mobius, and much in the way we learned that Sylvie is starting to turn these hunters with enchantment, reminding them of their memories, his friendship, and that's how they refer to it during the dialogue here in this episode. Loki is starting to free Mobius's mind, and that's where you're starting to see now the unravelings amongst the hunters and Mobius at the TVA via these Lokis. Now, the next scene is super important beyond just Sylvie explaining what's happened or how she's existed and more bonding between the two Lokis. All of a sudden, when the heat starts to rise and they really start to make a romantic connection, when they even might kiss, all of a sudden, we see the most steep nexus line, and that's what Mobius refers to it as. Have you ever seen anything like that? There's a reference, this episode is called the Nexus Event, and there's a couple of references to Sylvie's Nexus Event. We see it in the opener, and then she asks later, when they're on the elevator to see the timekeepers, what her Nexus Event was, because she truly didn't know. And Ravonna Renslayer, snidely sort of minimalizes her entire existence by saying, I don't remember. Maybe she does, and maybe she doesn't. That's not important. The important shade there was saying, hey, you don't matter. Whatever your Nexus Event was, it was irrelevant. The real Nexus Event that this episode is referring to is the Nexus Event that could happen there between the two Lokis that Mobius references later in the episode by saying whatever happened between the two of you, that's what could bring this all down. The power of love between two Lokis is enough to actually break whatever the TVA is trying to stop. And that's where you have to start to think about what's the intention of the TVA, and that's what the new scenes in this episode from here start to unravel when we go to the timekeepers and we learn that they're just animatrons, that they're literally just, we sort of guessed this, right? Wizard of Oz, they're just machines, they're just a mouthpiece for somebody else, much the way the TVA is set up from someone else who's got one predetermined idea of how the timeline should go, and anybody who would sort of do anything to mess that up is going to become either a member of the TVA working for them, or maybe in one of these tiny prisons, which we get our second reference to Asgard now. Lady Sif shows up, an amazing, amazing cameo, and we get Loki in the time loop. Now, this is referencing a couple of things. Of course, all of the Doctor Strange time loop stuff with what happened with Dormammu and the Time Stone also really reminded me of Black Mirror. If you've ever watched the series, this was something that they were able to do. Put someone in an infinity loop as long as they wanted in this town. Now, you think you see some sort of maturation in Loki as he's sort of explaining that he understands exactly what's going on, but it's the dialogue from Sif that's starting to drive home a point. It really wraps up this entire episode, and God, I know I am jumping around all over the place, but it's impossible to sort of talk about this stuff, like I said, without talking about the rest. She keeps driving home the point, you are alone, and you always will be. You are alone, and you always will be. But think about this. Didn't we just see that he wasn't alone? In fact, he admits that it's new to him, but he's found his partner in Sylvie, and once they connect, the Nexus Event that's created is insane. So in fact, no, he won't always be alone. And then we start to think about the intention of the TVA seizing these Loki variants. So many Loki variants. In fact, we're introduced to a ton more in the post-credit scene. We're going to break down all 4 of those Lokis. Yeah, there was a 4th Loki being held by a kid Loki. There was an alligator Loki. We're going to break down all 4, who they are, what they replicate. But the idea that the TVA may be more pointed at Lokis than you think, having to keep them isolated, having to keep pruning them, that it's not even that they're variants, but just their very existence is what sort of serves as the purpose of the TVA, because it's what ruins their leader's ultimate plan, which we all think may be Kang. I saw a couple of people thinking that Old Man Loki was sort of pulling the strings. Maybe he's the timekeeper, maybe he's the one who wants to to eliminate all the other Loki variants for himself. And while that's an interesting theory, because we see older Loki, Richard E. Grant, as one of the variants at the end of this episode, I don't think that's the case. I think the TVA is going to be what it technically has been in the past, and that King the Conqueror, who's going to be probably in charge of that with his connection to Ravonna Renslayer. But the TVA's main purpose is to prune these Loki variants as fast as possible and isolate them, because as Mobius spells out for us during this episode, whatever happened in that moment when Loki found love with the variant of himself, it was enough to what he thinks would bring this all down. And that is exactly the purpose of the TVA, to make sure that doesn't happen. Now we have to sort of talk about the end, what happened in the time prison. Beyond that, when Mobius comes in, he's finally convinced, because he's seen it off Ravonna Renslayer's tempad. He knows that she's responsible for killing Hunter C-20. We now have Sylvie interacting with B-15, and now the plot and the narrative are really starting to press forward. You have the TVA unraveling. We're starting to understand one of the TVA's main intentions, and you're starting to have a formation now of the TVA agents teaming up with Loki. So Mobius enters this time prison, and he talks about, hey, do you love her? Do you care about her? Whatever happened in that moment, that's enough to bring her down. And then we don't see Mobius and Loki again until they come right out of that time variant door, right in front of Ravonna Renslayer, who's waiting for them. That is the sleight of hand I was referring to in the prologue. In that moment where they're making a plan, and then we see them again, man, we already know Loki can sort of project. We already know Loki can shapeshift. He could have just been projecting those two images. There's a ton of deceits that he could have been employing there. It doesn't mean that was actual Loki and Mobius who got reset. But they might have been, and that's definitely what the show wants us to believe, because when Loki opens his eyes in the post-credit scene, his first two questions are, is this hell? Am I dead? Seemingly making us think that he understands he was just reset. And if he's waking up, it must be because he's dead now. He's replied to by 3 versions of Loki, actually 4. One of them is a crocodile.
I hope it was a crocodile that was talking.
4 Lokis are, and what
I
we're
really do.
looking at. All right, starting on the right, you've got Old Man Loki. That's played by Richard E. Grant, who we knew was cast in the film from the original announcement. We just didn't know exactly who he was playing. Now we see he's wearing that original version of Loki's actual costume from his first appearance in 1962 in Journey into Mystery 85. In the middle, we get the reveal of Kid Loki, played by Jack Veal. We had all assumed this casting was exactly this role. Turns out it is. This is a very weird Loki reincarnation arc where he died and comes back as a kid. That starts in Thor 6:17. Then on the left, you've got what looks like a Thor version of Loki. And I saw some people during the watch party referring to it as a Thor. No, this is definitely Loki. You can tell by the green color. And the way we were able to describe this character was actually from the German voice cast, who described him as boastful Loki. But there's no other information than that. And Kid Loki is holding a crocodile, but that crocodile has horns on his head. So it's clearly a crocodile version of Loki, which matches up perfectly with the frog version of Thor. Now, I don't think it's as important that these specific Lokis are the ones that show up. I think they're just really awesome Easter eggs for variants of Loki that we've had in the comics throughout the ages, modern all the way back to obviously the Golden Age. But it makes you think about what pruning might actually be, what happens to people when they are pruned and reset. And again, remember I told you, isolating the Loki variants and getting rid of them may be the whole point of the TVA. But what if uniting 2 Lokis were able to cause this Nexus event? What would happen if you united a ton of Lokis? Perhaps this is one of 2 things. It even makes me think immediately this is a resistance to the TVA set up by Lokis for Lokis. As Loki variants are pruned, they're somehow intercepted and brought here to join the cause. Or, and I think this is much more likely the case, as I brought up in this video just moments ago, I think when we see Mobius reach out to Loki after he enters the time loop prison and says, if you care about her, that's the way to bring them down, and they have the plan. I think the next time we see them stumble out of that time variance door, that their plan is already in motion. And the plan may have been the entire time to get Loki here to try to rally all of these Loki variants wherever this place is, wherever this cast-off point is, to try to rally all of them to bring them together, because it is a group of Lokis is what's needed to break the TVA. Why there would be a planet or timeline, which this is the apocalypse of New York, and obviously where we're going to see that ruined Avengers Tower, why there would be a place for all of these abandoned Lokis, maybe something that the TVA already knows about. And if the TVA knows about it, and we know Mobius got Ravonna Renslayer's Tempad, there's a chance Mobius maybe already knows about it, or just found out about it, that there is a place for pruned Lokis. If the whole point of the TVA is to prune Lokis, and these other variants are listed to work there, and the Lokis, again, are the whole focus, then there might be a place that the pruning Lokis go. A cast-off place, like a holding cell, like a Ghostbusters containment unit, and now all of a sudden, Loki's in that place. Mobius knows getting reset would be the way to send him there, so he allows him to get reset. Of course, that doesn't lessen the emotional pull of watching Mobius and Loki both get reset, but this is after
Yeah, it was a little bit
Mobius
tough.
out in the time prison to sort of set up a plan. And again, I think the next time we see him for the third time in this video, that plan is already in action. The variants of Loki being presented in this episode, and Loki in general, I have had some ideas about what was going on with the Timekeepers. There have been a ton of theories out there, and maybe some of them may still hold true, but now we know that the Timekeepers, like Wizard of Oz, were just a front piece for whoever is running the TVA from behind the scenes. And I think this brings in a couple of major players. Obviously, Kang running the TVA, hunting variants of Loki, because Loki is always the reason Kang can't get the timeline to work out the way he wants. And this is an amazing callback to the scene on the Mentis one at the beginning of this episode, and explains how it all works together. When Sylvie says the universe wants to break free, so it manifests chaos, like me being born the goddess of mischief, she's not making a metaphor, she's not equating the two, she's literally saying one causes the other. The universe wants to break free, so it manifests chaos. It manifests Loki, gods of mischief. Loki exists because the timeline exists. The timeline exists because Kang wants time to go a certain way. The universe doesn't want that, so the universe creates Loki variants. The harder he tries, the more Loki variants there are. There are always Loki variants, and that's why the TVA is specifically after Loki's and just basically enlists everybody else who shows up there to work for them or resets them. We've seen that in a couple of other cases and prunes. Do you see what I'm saying? The timeline is spawning these Lokis to help it break free. That's why the more variants could be part of the plan by Mobius and Loki in the first place, to bring them all together to eventually take down the TVA. There are still a ton of reveals to come. But man, hats off to the writers, because this is amazing. You're getting such a deep level of writing and resolve. It's not just the writing and the amazing reveals, it's the resolve. The fact that they can build this tension and resolve it like a master composer. This is the kind of writing I expected out of Rick and Morty writers. Michael Waldron, congratulations. You absolutely killed this series. Guys, I am so stoked about this. I thought this episode was amazing. I think this kind of writing is amazing because I already like the source content. I already like Marvel. I already like these characters. You add this kind of stuff where we can really geek out on the minutia of the dialogue, the character building. Again, when I brought up that point with Mobius, when he says one thing and then something completely different, but it's written as though he's trying to make the same point, and if you don't have a discerning ear or think about it, it would sound as though he is. This is the kind of stuff that really services rewatches and the kind of people that we are in the MCU community who want to dig deep. And I'm guessing after we finally get the entire series, all 6 episodes, we're going to be making references, inferences, and theories for months to come until we get the resolve in Multiverse of Madness or whatever we get with Spider-Man No Way Home. I'm guessing this sort of stuff is going to continue to bear fruit as far as our theories as well, because there's just so much packed in. Guys, let me know all your thoughts down below, reactions to my theories, the episode in general, and any theories of your own. And quickly, let's get into the giveaway stuff before I let you go. We're still giving away a PlayStation 5 now at 900,000 subscribers, and we will continue to give away PlayStation 5s at the channel for all the major milestones. And when we get to 900, we're going to pick it up and give them away every 25 as a thank you, obviously, alongside the other prizes like the weekly Disney Plus subscriptions while the shows are live. In fact, let's announce a brand new winner for that right now. Boom Basket, congratulations. Thanks so much for your support of the channel. I've gone ahead and subscribed to you. Either DM me at IamFires on Instagram or email me at everythingalways.yt@gmail.com. It's on the About section of my page. I'll go ahead and get your information and then get that right out to you guys. And it's as simple as that. If you want to be entered to win the CG magnet by Tom Hiddleston and Elizabeth Olsen, the PlayStations, the weekly subscriptions, or any of the future prizes that we give away, which I cannot wait to give away movie tickets again. So awesome. All the same rules will always apply. Hit the subscribe button because you need to be a subscriber. Then leave a comment down below because it's truly random. The more videos you comment on, the better chance you have of winning. All winners will be announced at the end of videos, the same way we're doing here. The best way to keep up with the content has always been to hit the notification bell with notifications turned on, especially recently. Who knows what YouTube is doing with notifications? Sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't, sometimes they won't send them at all. So either way, turn them on, and as always, if you enjoyed today's video or liked it, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button. My name is Michael Roman. You can find me in a couple of places. You can find me over on Instagram and Twitter under I Am Fires. You can also find me on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Apple, wherever you get original music with original music of my own under the name All Fires. Thanks so much for checking out the channel, guys, and stick around. We'll be posting again real soon. Smoke rose gently in the distance as debris and men.
There we go. We got the Japan documentary, how they rose to power in 40 years.
Scattered the seabed. Admiral Togo was in an elated mood as he stood on the bridge of his battle-scarred flagship, Mikasa, gazing across sparkling waters to where Japanese flags rose slowly above the 5 remaining Russian warships. Surrender. Togo had used Nelson's classic plan of attack, crossing the T and annihilated the enemy. It was over. The Russian fleet was no more. It was the 28th of May, 1905. Days later, Togo visited the Sasebo Naval Hospital on Kyushu Island to meet the defeated Russian admiral, Glowczewski, recovering from a near-fatal head wound. Glowczewski rose weakly, and the two men exchanged a warm handshake. Togo quietly added, "Defeat is a common fate of a soldier. There is nothing to be ashamed of in it. The great point is whether we have performed our duty." At the Battle of Tsushima, the Imperial Japanese Navy's fitter, stronger, leaner, and better trained fleet lost 3 tiny torpedo boats. Russia forfeited virtually its entire navy. 450 tons of shipping to 126,000. Perhaps one of the most significant naval battles in history, it was the grand finale of the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905, a conflict of 2 empires over colonial influence in China, Korea, and Manchuria. In its wake, Japanese power in the east was cemented, the seeds of Polish and Finnish independence were watered, and the first Russian Revolution overthrew the Tsar's autocratic rule. Indeed, the war set off a chain of events that led directly to World War I and the Communist Revolution of 1917. Yet, Togo Heihachiro was born into a land of sword-wielding samurai, feudal clans and subsistence farmers, without banks, factories, warships, foreign relations, even wheeled vehicles. Japan was yet to become a unified nation. New and ever-increasing contact with the West since 1853 had caused a chain reaction that utterly transformed the nation, dragging a dizzy Japan into the 19th century world order. This is the story of that journey, one of the most astonishing and unexpected half-centuries of change and revolution in human history. This is the story of the rise of an empire.
Dun dun.
This documentary is sponsored by Magellan TV, the documentary streaming service. Big thanks to Magellan TV for their continued support of Voices of the Past. We've got some fantastic documentaries coming in 2021 because of their continued faith in the channel. A long word, pirates.
Oh shit.
Shut pirates. Magellan, of course, has a huge range of documentaries as well, more than 3,000. A great series to try that matches up well with Japan in the West is Japan from Above 4K, a beautiful, high-quality exploration of the incredible landscapes Japan has to offer, almost as good as visiting. Magellan is essentially Netflix for documentaries, and you can now take advantage of an exclusive offer, 30% off an annual membership. This gives you an entire year for less than $3.50 a month, even if you've joined Magellan before and lapsed. You can simply click on the link in the description to claim your discounted membership today. Thanks. Commodore Perry's arrival in the 1850s provided a favourable opportunity for reform. People actually set eyes on foreigners and heard them speak, read Western books and translations, increasingly broadened their horizons, and then woke up to the fact that government could be overthrown by human powers. Metaphorically, this was somewhat like a deaf and blind man suddenly hearing sounds and seeing colours for the first time. A great and mysterious event. Religious talismans came fluttering down out of the empty sky. Men dressed as women, women dressed as men, townspeople dancing through villages, villagers cavorting in towns, whole populations drunk, orgiastic behaviour in the streets, and paper talismans falling from the heavens like cherry blossoms in the wind. This world was coming to an end. A new one was at hand. Age Anika. What the hell, sang the revelers. Bring it on. 1867. 8 years had passed since Japan had suddenly plugged into the international economy, destabilizing government, disrupting society, sparking violence, and exponentially upending external demand for products and resources. The economy buckled. Prices soared, many became rich, but many more sunk into poverty as bullion left the country in exchange for ships, guns, and foreign curios. The rural population, unused to the massive overseas demand for their produce, struggled to keep up with supply. Famines followed, urban riots and peasant uprisings swept the country. Japan was ripe for revolution. All rebellion was put down until over huge swathes of the country, paper prayer talismans started falling like snowflakes from the sky, ushering in the end of days. Up and down the land, the pent-up tension of ordinary folks suddenly ignited. They took to the streets, singing and dancing. The final refrain was always Age Anika. What the hell? Why not? Who cares? A new age was coming. A few months later, on January the 27th, 1868, while the people continued their bacchanalia, the first clash of the Civil War that would usher in that new age was fought. 15,000 shogunal troops faced 5,000 rebels from the southwestern clans of Satsuma and Choshu. The shogun's men, armed mainly with spears, advanced and were repelled easily, massacred by howitzers and Gatling guns. Western weaponry tearing the old order to shreds. On the second day, they attacked again, but this time the rebels revealed a far more powerful weapon, a banner with the imperial chrysanthemum symbol emblazoned upon it. The shogun's forces melted away, and the shogun himself fled on a US warship. To have fired on the banner would have been high treason. Though my body may decay on the island of Ezo, my spirit guards my lord in the east. Hijikata Toshizo, the shogun's last general, carefully brushwrote his death poem on June 20th, 1869. Minutes before, he had stood on the ramparts of Hakodate Castle in Hokkaido. No Tenshukaku bastion towered above this star-shaped, gun-strewn, French-style edifice. It was a European castle on a Japanese island. Below in the bay circled a host of great black ships, just like those that had forced Japan to open to the west in 1854. Only this time, it was the new imperial government, the rebels of last year, that sailed these smoke-belching leviathans. After the initial defeat at Fushimi, the brutal civil war which had brought Hijikata here had raged across the land. Sword-wielding samurais had charged Gatling guns, ancient matchlock arquebuses faced cutting-edge rifles, and graceful castles defended by handmade wooden cannon were cremated by the latest British-made artillery. After the first conflict in more than 200 years, the very fabric of this ancient land lay in tatters, engulfed in the flames of modern warfare. Hijikata himself had just bid farewell to his French friends, brave men who had fought to the end with him for a now hopeless cause. A decade ago, it had been a criminal offence to associate with a foreigner, let alone fight alongside one. This was the last stand. There was nowhere left to run. Hijikata mounted his horse and rode out with his men. They charged. They died. It was June 20th, 1869, and the new imperial government was finally victorious. His Imperial Majesty was back in his rightful place atop the land of the gods, lifted there atop a wave of Western weaponry. The war and previous decade of turmoil had made one thing clear. The world would never be the same again. Japan could no longer stand rigid against the hurricane of change, but like a tree must bend and adapt to thrive in new conditions. The newly sovereign Emperor Meiji instructed his people. Knowledge shall be sought throughout the world so as to strengthen the foundation of imperial rule. Tsurume knelt and kept her head to the floor in a Zare bow, not daring to raise her eyes. In front of her was a hanging screen, and behind that, she supposed, was Empress Shokin. A lady's voice rang out, bidding Ume and the other 4 girls to go to the USA and study for the good of our countrywomen. In seconds, it was over. The lady in waiting ushered them out, heads low, eyes to the floor. The girls were the first ever Japanese females to be sent to study abroad. Ume was just 6. She was the youngest member of one of the most ambitious groups of travellers in history. The Iwakura Embassy, a 2-year global mission of diplomacy, investigation, observation and learning from 1871 to 1873. Dispatching the Iwakura mission to America and Europe must be cited as the most important event that built the foundation of our state. In 1871, the new nation, forged from hundreds of fiefs and domains, was in dire straits, held in semi-colonial perjury by unequal treaties signed under threat of war. Most importantly, custom duties were controlled externally, and Japan had lost the ability to protect domestic industries or limit imports and exports. This was a national humiliation. On top of this unbearable shame, the new goods, technologies and industrial infrastructure so badly needed to fight against the treaties and strengthen the nation all came from abroad at huge cost, and foreign experts had to be hired at great expense. The solution? Send the ruling class on a world tour to discover the essence of a modern nation-state, and at the same time attempt to persuade the Western powers to repeal the crippling treaties. The global odyssey had started in San Francisco, where crowds of up to 50,000 welcomed the diplomats and gawped. Reverend Horatio Stebbins, at a banquet of welcome, loudly proclaimed, "It seems a repetition of the old story, where the Magi of the East were led to where the child lay. Welcome, most illustrious descendants of the old stock. Your presence is more welcome than the frankincense and myrrh." The Japanese envoys were akin to ancient sages, come to worship at the fount of Western civilization. The USA, less than a century old and recovering from debilitating civil war, was honoured to be the first port of call for the globe-trotting entourage. And these enigmatic Japanese tourists kept meticulous records of their journey. Customs and character in the East and West are very different. Indeed, at times they seem to be direct opposites. Westerners enjoy social activities and public events. Eastern peoples tend to avoid them. This is not only a relic of Japan's policy of national isolation, Eastern people are also indifferent to wealth and do not regard commerce as a primary concern. Westerners like to go out and enjoy themselves socially. Eastern people, on the other hand, prefer to stay indoors and relax, creating gardens within their own homes. Westerners stress practical science and the rationality of material things, whereas Eastern people emphasize the science of the abstract and non-material. Eventually, the explorers left the US for Britain, and Ume was left to be brought up as an American lady in New England. She would later become a pioneer of women's education. And so it was December the 5th, 1872, when a young Ito Hirobumi, future first Prime Minister of Japan, entered the surprisingly small but intricately decorated audience chamber at Windsor Castle. The fire burned with gusto, but the room still felt chilly. Queen Victoria, the ruler of the world's largest empire, but modest of stature and sour face, was wrapped in great black fur-trimmed robes, which all but hid the simple chair on which she held state. The ambassador, Iwakura Tomomi, looking resplendent in morning dress, his top hat tucked under his arm, bowed from the waist. For someone who had only recently forsaken his traditional Kyoto court robes for Western clothing, he played his part admirably well. Ito interpreted as the Queen bade Iwakura welcome and passed her greetings to his emperor. The ambassador, in turn, extended the respects of his sovereign and expressed the wish for eternal friendship between the two island realms. The audience was brief and ended with Victoria's wish that the course of Japanese policy may be such as to ensure for the future the lively sympathy of the nations of Christendom with Japan. Less ancient magi of the East and the potential enemy of the gate. Behave or else. Next was a grand tour of Europe, followed by a return home through the shiny new Suez Canal, with stops in European colonies in Asia. They had truly seen the world, though their request for new treaties had been rebuffed at every turn. But they did return home with something just as important. They had set eyes on what they were up against. The modern state needed legitimacy among the people. The rule of law, railways, public schools, shipping lines, industrialized agriculture, banks, stock exchanges, telegraph, a civil code, a civil service, police, prisons, lunatic asylums, a state postal service, sewage systems, hospitals, public libraries, a national anthem, even well-educated women to raise the next generation. But most of all, it needed strong armed forces, international respect, and a constitution. No more would the Western world be held at arm's length and looked down upon. The barbarians were now figures of respect to be emulated. Many Japanese people even looked down on themselves, as, in the words of Fukuzawa Yukichi, one of the greatest thinkers of the day, half civilized. Japan had to climb civilization's ladder, attain enlightenment status, or, as Fukuzawa would have it, leave Asia and join Europe. They were determined not to end as just another European colony. Japan would take the best from around the world and plant it at home. Though some foreign seeds had already found their way in and were changing the country in unexpected ways. Thomas Garber sat in the corner of his safe house, sipping his shochu spirit, and watched as the fugitives he was hiding debated among themselves. The authorities would never raid the house of a foreigner. It was the ideal place for them to hide. The spectacle really demanded a more contemplative tipple, a good beer. But beer culture had not arrived in Nagasaki yet. Glover was a criminal, a gun runner. The men gesturing in front of him were representatives of the two most powerful southern clans, the Satsuma and Choshu. They were negotiating a top-secret alliance, that much he knew, but he could not understand a word they said, so they tolerated his presence. He, after all, was the one who supplied guns. At the end of it, the Satsuma and Choshu clans, foes for hundreds of years, were allies. Their bitter enmity was overcome by one great purpose, a burning desire to topple the shogun, which they duly did with Glover's help. He had supplied the rebels with modern ordnance, rifles and warships from Europe, and in the new Japan now found himself in an enviable position. His influence with the country's new rulers had won him the contract to import Japan's first mint, as well as a host of ships and other industrial paraphernalia. And his role as a dealer of ships brought him to the attention of Iwasaki Yataro, the owner of a fledgling startup shipping business called Mitsubishi. 14 years later, in 1888, his input, not to mention his government friends, had propelled Mitsubishi to the head of Japan's industrial race. Glover was filthy rich. Glover liked beer. But a few years previously, as Japan's only brewery looked set to go bust, he had stepped in to save it and add it to Mitsubishi's ever-growing portfolio. His Japanese partners had been uncertain, but he had persuaded them. If Japanese consumers were to drink this strange, bitter brew, it needed a Japanese name, and Kirin, a kind of mythical dragon, was settled upon. Kirin is now one of the world's largest brewers, and beer is Japan's favorite alcoholic drink. But beer was far from the only change in the national taste buds. The Japanese abominate meat eating. For on no account whatsoever will they eat donkey, horse, cow, much less pig, duck, or hens, and they are naturally averse to lard. They regard a householder who slaughters an animal reared in his house as cruel and unclean. Snow fell lightly as the group of 10 Ontake monks, dressed in white from head to toe, approached the bridge over the Imperial Palace's wide moat. They marched sharply up to the Imperial Guards and demanded an immediate audience with the Emperor. When the soldiers refused, they tried to force their way in. The troops withdrew in formation, raised their rifles, the monks charged. A volley rang out. 4 monks lay dead. Bright red pooled around their white-clad corpses, the polar opposite of the recently adopted red-centered Hinomaru national flag. These monks had given their lives to tell the Emperor that by consuming animal flesh he was destroying the soul of the Japanese people. For Japan, a country that had been largely vegetarian for 1,200 years, was now embracing the taste of civilization. Beef, and the Emperor was leading the way. During the long years of
Hey man, hamburgers are good.
meat eating was known of. Chinese and Dutch merchants were permitted to engage in the foul and impure practice, and it was not unknown for the lower classes of Japanese society to do likewise. But no civilized person would surely contemplate such self-defiling behavior, until the Meiji Revolution turned everything on its head. There remain many people who blindly dislike this, saying that meat eating is filthy, in accordance with the customs our nation has followed for many long centuries. This is a specious argument born out of ignorant blindness that demonstrates a lack of knowledge about the natural disposition of human beings and a failure to discern the principles of the human body. Meat eating was part of Fukuzawa's revolutionary crusade to civilize his compatriots. An entire culture that believed eating meat was to risk consuming your own ancestors, who might have been reincarnated in animals, your own flesh and blood,
Oh, wow.
was urged to embrace the practice. It seemed a ludicrous, preposterous notion, but it quickly came to pass. Beef is certainly the most delicious thing, isn't it? I wonder why we in Japan haven't eaten such a clean thing before. We should be grateful that even people like ourselves can now eat beef, thanks to the fact that Japan is steadily becoming a truly civilized country. one example of the massive cultural changes of the Meiji Revolution. During the last half of the 19th century, people who did not eat meat suddenly did. People who did not use wheeled transport suddenly did. People who did not cut their hair suddenly did. People who had painted their teeth cosmetically black suddenly didn't. People who had traditionally written classical Chinese suddenly discovered literacy in the vernacular, even in previously disdained European tongues. And perhaps most shocking at the time, some people rejected native gods and prophets in favour of a foreign deity, the Christian god. Finally, same-sex love, once normal among men, went underground, and female accession to the imperial throne ceased. Government, food, clothing, culture, change was sweeping across the nation at a dizzying pace. But there was one piece of the puzzle that would eventually prove the most consequential: Japan's ability to make war. Charles Cooper Penrose Fitzgerald, Rear Admiral, Royal Navy, lately of the China Station, sat in his study overlooking the English Channel and reflected on something that had been bugging him for a while: the question of Japan. As one of the first British visitors, the naval officer had seen it first in 1858. He eagerly snapped up delicate porcelain and observed in astonishment that shipping seemed little changed from the 16th century. And yet on his last visit in 1897, he had found a country changed beyond recognition. He wrote that he was quite certain they are now a long way past the imitative stage, and in some matters they appear to have improved upon the methods of their instructors. Fitzgerald sighed and reflected that an excellent example of this were the 4 giant armoured cruisers currently being built in Newcastle. Tokiwa, Asama, Izumo, Iwate were better designed than those built for Her Majesty's Navy, with rather more fighting power and speed into a given tonnage than has ever been done before. 16th century military backwater to 20th century military powerhouse in 4 decades. Initially, Japan had depended on the imports of foreign weapons through merchants like Thomas Glover. This had not been enough. Without an indigenous munitions industry, foreign powers could easily hold the country to ransom in the event of war. Starting small, a basic industrial know-how was developed through the 1870s, and in 1880, the Murata rifle was unveiled, the model going through various improvements as the army became more sophisticated, and eventually being replaced by the Arisaka model in 1897. That would be used throughout the world, even by the Royal Navy in World War I, when British production fell short. But weapons were one thing. Tactics, logistics, deployment strategy, and the medical care of military personnel were quite another. Japan had introduced conscription in 1872, and several up-and-coming young officers had observed the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. They had seen the superior Prussian leadership, weaponry, strategic thinking, and use of modern technology, such as railways, and determined that the newly unified Germany was the best model for Japan. So, in 1885, responding to a formal request from Japan, Helmuth von Moltke, chief of the Imperial German General Staff, dispatched one of his most talented officers, Jacob Meckel, to Tokyo. Sixty of Japan's most senior officers were returned to the classroom. They sat and took notes for a year as their new sensei lectured them in every aspect of military science. He watched as they put theory into practice, drilling the officers time and again until everything was perfect. Then he moved on to the army at large, reforming command, supply, communication and medical units along German lines. New railways connecting far-flung bases were engineered. Even uniforms were henceforth to follow the Teutonic model. Finally, he looked at a map and, seeing the Korean Peninsula's location, declared that it was a knife pointing at Japan's belly. Should Korea fall into the hands of an enemy power, Russia or China for example, Japan would be at their mercy. This strategic observation led to the First Sino-Japanese War and the Russo-Japanese War, both fought over control of the Korean peninsula. And then there was the Navy. The first three built-to-order naval ships were completed in Britain in 1878 and sailed to Yokohama by British crews. The Japanese did not feel that their own sailors were competent enough for the job. During the next 2 decades, most Japanese naval vessels were constructed abroad, but increasingly they were supervised by Japanese personnel, and by the end of the century, Japan was building better ships in English shipyards than England herself is constructing for her own navy. By World War I, Japanese industry no longer needed to outsource manufacturing. It was quite capable of building world-class military vessels on its own. And indeed the first ever airborne assault from the sea was launched against German and Austro-Hungarian shipping in China on the 6th of September 1914. The student truly had become the teacher. And so top
boats.
down, the steps to a modern Western civilization were being aggressively pursued. Japan was leaving Asia and moving towards Europe. But not everyone was happy. When I swing around, shadows of yesterday are not seen. Dark road to go is a mountain pass to death. Toshiro Isuke refused the blindfold offered him, climbed the ladder, and stood below the noose, grinning at those gathered to watch him swing. He, a gambler, ruffian, latter-day Robin Hood, was there for leading thousands of desperate peasants in rebellion, destroying debt and tax records, declaring freedom and self-government, and leading his followers to Tokyo, armed with spears, farming gear, and hunting muskets, under a banner proclaiming new rule of benevolence. It had been a hopeless cause, and he knew it. Toshiro had bid a final farewell to his family before leaving to lead the furious farmers who took their inspiration from the new idea of freedom and people's rights, vague, foreign notions which were trickling down even into rural valleys and mountain communities. The government met them with gunfire. Hundreds, perhaps thousands had perished. Now Toshiro would join them. He stood unflinching as the rope was placed around his neck. The board was kicked from beneath him. It was February the 19th, 1885. At first, after the tumultuous 60s, in the 1870s, the people, mostly in the countryside, their lives unchanged, had listened to rumours of great goings-on in the cities and ports, of men and women with strange coloured skins in strange ways, of great ships and of long carriages travelling on metal roads, new types of clothes, and meat eating. They had, in the main, shrugged and got on with the same job peasants had always done, producing food and raising silkworms. Then things started to change. First, farmers were given far more autonomy in what they could grow. Then, all commoners were ordered to take a surname. Previously, such things had only been for the rich and powerful, not mere farmers. Then came the land taxes. Peasants had always been tithed, of course, a share of their crops, more in good years than bad. But this was a uniform 3% of the land value, payable in cash. Most rural people had never used money before. Subsistence farmers had little to sell and bought even less. There were widespread protests, some violent. Next came the blood tax. The government came for their sons. They were told the boys would become great warriors for the emperor, but rumour had it that their blood was being fed to foreigners. The peasant backlash worsened, and troops, those very same conscript boys posted to far-off prefectures, were time and again sent in to quell disorder. Gradually, things calmed down in much of the country. The conscripts sent wages home to pay taxes. The government lowered the rate to 2.5%, The first peasant-led cooperatives enabled a degree of self-help and development, and the social change that had swept the cities slowly in patchwork fashion spread to the countryside in the form of schools, post offices, and police. Very occasionally, a foreigner, a teacher, or perhaps engineer, garbed in uncomfortable, unpractical-looking clothing, with armor like black footwear and topped off with hilarious headgear, popped up. Some of the more dapper and wealthier villages started to return from trips to town with leather shoes and bowler hats. The countryside was never fully pacified, however, and rising debts, extortionate rents, combined with a little knowledge and consciousness of basic Western liberal thought, led to a freedom and people's rights movement for which Toshiro Isuke, among others, gave his life. But the real challenge was from the samurai. As a caste of hereditary warriors, they were unsuited to a world where commerce, industry, and European learning ruled the roost. First, they lost their right to wear swords in public. Then their stipends switched to government bonds. Many samurai tried to adapt but failed miserably, sinking into abject poverty. People they still regarded as deeply inferior prospered. One thing they did know how to do was fight. An old-school samurai in government, such as Saigo Takamori, tried to persuade his colleagues that a good old-fashioned invasion of defenseless Korea was just what was needed. Most of the government, fresh back from their globe-trotting mission, disagreed, knowing full well that the Western powers, not to mention China, would swiftly punish Japan. The would-be invaders resigned and returned to their rural homes. Between 1873 and 1877, time and time again, they rose up in arms, but all the revolts ended in failure. The end came on September the 24th, 1877, when Saigo and his 25,000 insurgents, after 8 months of fighting, were reduced to just 40 men. Saigo performed seppuku, and the last rebels charged to their death. Peasant conscripts bested the mighty samurai. Modernity was victorious. The old ways were truly done. Future conflicts would mostly be fought by opposing factions and political parties in newspapers, public meetings, and demonstrations. The Western concept of politics and widespread public participation in politics had been superimposed upon older practices of local governance, and slowly a party system of government would develop. But there was a feeling that the decade of giddy change needed to be reined in. There could be no going back, but the way forward should be more considered. Accepting foreign ways unthinkingly became a thing of the past. From now on, Japanese spirit, Western learning, Wakon Yosai, was the way. At the custom house, we were attended to by minute officials in blue uniforms of European pattern and leather boots. Very civil creatures, contrasting pleasantly with the insolent and rapacious officials who performed the same duties at New York. Isabella Bird, a pioneering female British journalist, the upright and devout daughter of a most Victorian vicars, was one of a growing number of Westerners who were fascinated by Japan and knew that her readers would be equally so. But by 1878, Tokyo, Kyoto, and the central regions were already old hat. Her audience needed the titillation of a path less travelled. She went north. Alone, but for an interpreter against the strong advice of the government, she pushed on through recently war-ravaged lands, where New Japan had hardly ventured, as far as the lately colonized island of Hokkaido, where the intrepid adventurer lived with what some claimed were a lost Caucasian or Jewish tribe, the indigenous Ainu people. Her fans loved it. Japan was new, exotic, the dream of centuries of legends realized, and was already drawing not only merchants like Glover, eager to make a quick buck, but writers and critics who spread knowledge and familiarity around the world. Other Europeans and Americans settled down, and while few embraced all the practices and cultures of their adopted land, one custom tended to appeal. The charm of the Japanese system of hot bathing is proved by the fact that almost all the foreign residents in the country adopt it. Europeans and Americans were not yet fully persuaded of the wisdom of daily bathing. A bath a week, if that, was more than sufficient. Japan was a revelation. Every country house has its bathtub in which the body can be purified and reinvigorated after the toils of the day. They lay back and unwound.
Oh, wait.
Baths weren't the only fashion to catch on internationally. George Frederick Ernest Albert,
There we
who
go.
would in a distant future rule the British Empire as George V, lay slumped in an armchair in 1881, his right hand holding a book, his left arm being pricked. With little instruments that look like camel hair brushes, only instead of hairs, they consist of so many very minute needles. He was engaging in what was becoming something akin to a rite of passage for British royals, a souvenir tattoo.
Ha!
The artist, Horichio, first sketches the outline on the skin, then pricks in the colours required, blue or red, holding the instrument in the right hand and grasping your arm with the left. He did not find the pricking hurt at all. And where the royal family led, mere mortals followed. Tattoos in Japan were and are the mark of ruffians at best, monsters at worst. The government was horrified and forbade the practice. The Prince of Wales, later Edward VIII, wrote in 1922, "My chief disappointment is not being able to get tattooed in Japan, but it seems that it's been made illegal, though I can't think why." From the 1860s onwards, lacquerware, fans and ceramics with Japanese scenes upon them became the height of fashion around the world. This was part of a movement known as Japanism. Painting, architecture, landscaping, ceramics and fashion fed eagerly on a fresh aesthetic, which swiftly became incorporated and eventually one of the foundations of 20th century art. Those inspired include Van Gogh, Monet, Matisse, Renoir and Picasso. So you see how quickly things can change. These days, one would not look twice at a Japanese walking around Amsterdam in a black suit and high hat, while our beauties, with their night dresses and high heels, could patter to Tokyo without drawing any of the attention or the admiration they valued. And indeed, kimono was certainly worn as party pieces and indoor wear extensively in the late 19th century, and the wearing of high heels did indeed take off among women, leaving open the possibility that Japanese footwear could have inspired this still popular Western craze. And the passion for Western clothing exploded even more quickly in Japan. First soldiers and police, then postmen, then dapper gentlemen of means and style, and just very occasionally a lady attending a Western-style ball or events where foreigners were present. Then there were the swimsuit girls, pictures of whom were sold for domestic consumption but also snapped up voraciously by overseas visitors. By the end of the century, Western clothing was no longer novel. It had taken root as deeply as railways and beef. Clothing, aesthetics, ideas, techniques, habits, all crisscrossed from east to west and from west to east. And amongst all this toing and froing, as had been the way since the beginnings of international trade, people were a valued commodity. Matsue Otana was in a state of extreme excitement. She was about to escape this hellhole. Her lover, Segokichi, was coming for her. Outside, the Australian outback landscape was a never-ending expanse of red-brown soil and scraggy low bushes, a far cry from her lush, green Kyushu home. Inside the festering room was a stained sleeping mat and a suitcase with her few possessions. Matsue was 21 and had been sold into prostitution, and she was there in the Australian desert with the full approval of the government, who believed that should Asian gold rush immigrants not have olive-skinned women to buy sex from, they would ravage respectable white ladies instead. Matsue was, as far as the Australians were concerned, a pressure valve to protect Anglo-Saxon society. Her poverty-stricken parents had sold her to pay a tax bill. Matsue was not alone. There were tens of thousands just like her throughout the world. Thanks to better diet and medical care, the Japanese population had increased at a huge speed, and many of the excess population were encouraged to try their luck abroad. Fukuzawa Yukichi even argued that because the vast majority of emigrants were single men, for the encouragement of overseas settlement by our people, it is necessary for prostitutes to go abroad. Matsue was shot by her lover as she was packing to escape the brothel. He then took his own life. The police investigated, but no motive was found. Case closed. Anyone who is the least bit Japanese must try to advance Japan from the third rank, where she now stands, to the second, and when she achieves the second rank, then to the first, and finally to the foremost position in the entire world. It was early in the morning, but Viscount Mori Aranori was already in full dress uniform, ready to leave the palace. Outside, the streets bubbled with excitement. The townsfolk got up in their finest and brightest garb, were celebrating with music and chanting, dragging huge wheeled shrines through the streets so their neighborhood gods could join in the festivities. Today, February 11th, 1889, was the crowning glory of Mori's life, and that of most of those celebrating so freely outside. An imperial constitution was to be granted to the people. The Constitution was a unique charter, comprising European legal and governmental philosophy with the best of Japanese morals and spirit. Mori allowed himself a minute to contemplate the course his life had taken. He had come a long way. As a young man, he had studied in Britain and Europe. Being Japan's first ambassador to the USA, he also joined the Brotherhood of the New Life, a New York utopian community. Shoveling manure and butchering swine on the Brotherhood's farm had built muscles and helped instill the lifelong belief in personal, physical strength. Now, he was Minister for Education. Looking at Europe or America, we see that in every nation people of all classes, both men and women alike, possess a love of country and an unshakable national unity. The population should be taught to the very marrow of their bones to feel a fervent spirit of loyalty and patriotism, to maintain a steadfastness of character and constancy of purpose, to be ashamed of cowardice, and to hold all servility in contempt. The people needed to be physically strong and literate, and devoted to their emperor. All children, rich and poor, now had elementary education focused on discipline, friendship, and obedience. Mori's secretary knocked softly on his study door. There was a young man to see him. Would he grant an audience? Mori needed to gather his thoughts before leaving for the palace. He declined. Shortly after, the Viscount walked gracefully down his grand staircase. He could see the young man, excited and clearly refusing to leave. Suddenly, the youth lunged at him and thrust a concealed kitchen knife into Mori's belly. The nobleman fell, and through a mist of pain and confusion, saw his bodyguard cut the robe down. Mori Aranori, one of the greatest statesmen of his age, died of the wound. A scrap of paper found on the assailant said that this was the punishment for his insulting the great shrine of Ise and the emperor. The knife was little different to that which he had used to slaughter pigs in New York. The Constitution soon led to treaty revision. One more rung of the ladder. Though Mori's was not the only assassination attempt. Nicholas Alexandrovich, heir to the Russian throne, sat back in his rickshaw. It had been a beautiful trip to Lake Biwa, and now they were returning to Kyoto through the narrow streets of Otsu. Funny things, these rickshaws, he thought. Looking undignified, but actually highly comfortable. Great fun. his fresh tattoo wasn't so painful. He regretted it already. He rubbed his arm gently as he caught the eye of a young Japanese girl standing in the crowd around the ritual, her jet black hair shimmering in the light. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a blade slashed down. Blood spurted from his face and he recoiled. The attacker fled, two ritual drivers following hot on his heels, tackling him to the ground. Nicholas was taken swiftly for treatment. By morning, the Emperor Meiji himself, fearing a pretext for Russia to declare war, was at the wounded prince's bedside, having sped through the night by train from Tokyo. Then, there was uproar. 10,000 telegrams were sent by well-wishers, and a young girl in Kyoto slit her throat to demonstrate remorse.
Damn.
Russia did not declare war, and the policeman who had attacked Nicholas was given life imprisonment, despite the government urging the death penalty. The Japanese judiciary had come of age and was demonstrating its independence with the rule of law over political expediency. But by the end of the century, a fresh pushback against what many saw as the depredations of foreigners and destruction of Japanese ways was reaching extreme levels. Cracks had appeared as far back as 1886, a major example being the sinking of the British merchant ship the Normanton that year. The crew had been a mix of British, German, Indian and Chinese sailors, with 25 Japanese passengers aboard. The captain and European crew had hauled their lifeboats and left the Asians to their fate. Not one had survived. The Japanese public had been outraged. A song caught on across the nation. No matter how different your race may be, no matter how little you know of mercy, you just stood by and watched. You left us there to die. You coward. In the years since, nationalist gatherings of tens of thousands demanding action against the foreign powers and their expulsion from Asian colonies have become frequent events. They went so far as to protect, nurture and fund Asian revolutionaries, such as Sun Yat-sen, a man who later became China's first president. The government, treading a fine line, used victory in the Sino-Japanese War of 1895, overseas expansion, and the imposition of unfair treaties with Korea to control nationalist tendencies and keep sentiment behind it. By the time Admiral Togo was preparing his ships for imminent combat with Russia, Nakai Chomin, another great thinker of the age, noted that if we beat Russia, we expand to the continent and bring peace to Asia. If we lose, our people will awaken from their dream. Peace to Asia meant a Pax Nipponicus, an Asia under Japanese tutelage. But Nakai believed that losing to Russia would mean the whole Japanese Enlightenment, a revolution largely imposed from above, would disintegrate. As Nakai predicted, the victory once more carried the people with their government. And as Japanese power grew, inevitably voices in the West started to sound the alarm. Starting in Germany, use of words like yellow peril soon spread to the USA. Japan had ceased to be a quaint, feminine-like, exotic realm of dainty, post-feudal vistas. It was now a nation on an equal footing. Crucially, non-Christian and non-white. A threat to widespread, cherished ideas of the supremacy of the white race and superiority of Christian civilization. Hawkish politicians dreamed of a time when she could be put in her place. The Japanese were only too aware of this and felt those insults keenly. For now, though, they would grin and bear it, bide their time, and hope to establish true acceptance as equals in the coming decades. This thinking, and the lack of that acceptance, was also to shape the century to come. Ito Hirobumi, now Marquis Ito, stood in the grand magnificence of the Grafton Gallery in Mayfair, London, before the movers and shakers of British society, and thanked his 1,000 guests for their warm welcome to Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. His journey had been Japan's journey, from humble interpreter of the Iroquois embassy to the heady heights of the first rank of nations. It was 1897, and Japan and Ito felt confident and wealthy enough to be lavish in its entertainment, to win the hearts and minds of the leaders of the most powerful empire on Earth. There was a feeling that the recent abolition of the unequal treaties might develop into a grand alliance between the two island empires, an Anglo-Japanese alliance. If so, Japan would have reached the very peak of the international order in only 4 decades. The triumphs had been small at first. Ito grinned to himself when he thought of the innocents. The passengers on the first railway had removed their shoes before entering carriages, and embarrassed on alighting to realize their mistake. And yet these days, Japanese-owned railways were expanding, even overseas, and now Japan manufactured and exported her own locomotives. Back then, the post office had been the first Japanese government body to achieve international standards. By 1882, 4,000 post offices and over 3,000 miles of telegraph extended swift communications into even the most isolated regions. By the 1880s, an industrial base had been firmly established, and export markets, particularly in silk, were developing well. Now, at the turn of the century, the majority of his guests in London were dressed in that luxury fabric. The global silk market now belonged to Japan. Ito thought back to his long conversations with the German Chancellor von Bismarck, who had argued that small countries such as Japan should rely on their own efforts, not on international law or diplomatic agreements, to maintain their independence against the encroaching of imperialist powers like France and Britain. Consequently, against the arguments of many, military strength was at the heart of the new state. The army, trained in German fashion, had shocked the world with swift victory over China 2 years previously. The navy, formed under British tutelage, was already world class. Territory had grown exponentially too, first northwards to Hokkaido and the islands that the Russians knew as the Kurils, then south to the Ryukyu Kingdom, now Okinawa Prefecture. Taiwan had been ceded by China as a spoil of war. Strictly controlled and regulated elections were also regularly held. Political parties, social movements, and civil society now formed the bedrock of many communities. Japan, Ito felt, now had no need to escape from Asia. Rather, the buds of a new Asia were just starting to blossom in the fertile soil of Japanese islands. Japan's was a unique Asian modernity, distinct from the Western one, and it would spread. Marquis Ito went back to his British guests, charming them effortlessly after long years of dedicated practice. The Anglo-Japanese alliance was signed in 1902. Japan had made it onto the world stage, risen to Mori Harinori's foretold first rank. And just 3 years later, the waters of Tsushima seethed with men as Russian battleships slipped slowly, sleekly, beneath the cresting waves. Drenched blonde heads bobbed as comrades struggled against each other, treading water wildly to stay afloat. They would not last long, and night was coming. Minutes before, Mikasa, Admiral Togo's flagship, had sustained huge damage and many casualties under fire from the very sailors drowning before his eyes. Age 21, Togo had been there in 1869, at the beginning of the New Age, in the black ships bombarding Hakodate Castle as the final shogunate forces made their futile last stand. His childhood friend Mori Harinori had once insisted upon Japan's destiny amongst the first-ranked nations, and as Togo looked across the bow of his ship, it seemed at that moment to have truly advanced to the heralded foremost position. It had taken less than 40 years. It was time to be magnanimous, to show that Japan was an honorable nation, generous and humane in victory, a worthy great power. Togo ordered Mikasa's lifeboats out. An hour later, the first of the sailors, many mere boys, huddled, cross-legged on the heaving deck, blankets around them, holding mugs of steaming tea. In the distance, another ship exploded into flame and sank for minutes. The bones of the Russian bear were being laid to rest beneath the Tsushima Strait. In 1905, the Russian War was won, and one of the most fascinating social, cultural, and political transformations of all history had ended. But the Japanese journey of the 20th century, a journey set into motion 50 years before by the great black ships belching smoke on the horizon, that journey had only just begun.
Oh damn, that's it? I shouldn't say that's it. I mean, it's pretty fucking good. But still, man, that was the last video I had. How long have I been streaming? It's gotta be over 2 hours now. Yeah. 2. Okay. Let's see, what do we got? There we go. More Loki.
YouTube algorithms. So here's the thing about this, man. Episode number 4 was amazing. Episode number 4 was awesome. I'm so glad we got episode number 4 coming off of episode number 3.
Yeah, 4 picked up. 4 picked up speed.
That version of Loki, it was just boring as hell. So here's the thing about this, man. Like, I think the story of Sylvie so far is interesting, but honestly, man, does her whole story really just boil down to a petty revenge story? Because if it is, that's the least interesting thing ever, right? Like, from what I gather, just from what we see, right, here's what we can kind of piece together, that she was a little girl, and for whatever reason, the reason was not given to her by Renslayer, when she asked her in the elevator, what was my Nexus event? Renslayer's like, I don't really remember. We don't know what the Nexus event was, but we know that it was significant enough. The TVA snatched her up, and they basically brought her into the TVA itself, which scared her. So she pickpocketed Renslayer, took her TIM pad, tried to go back to her universe, only to find it was wiped out, and then she's been on the run for the TVA ever since.
For happy cells and a happy body. That's joking.
That's it. What? It's just, you hurt me, so I'm gonna hurt you back. Is that really all it is? Because that's a pretty flimsy and kind of lame origin story. But regardless, Sylvie herself is cool, so I guess it makes up for it. But man, there were some mind-blowing moments in this show. Okay, so here's the thing. As soon as Owen Wilson came out of that little portal thing with Loki, and you saw Renslayer and those TVA guys standing there, I was like, all right, Owen Wilson ain't making it. Owen Wilson's not gonna make it, son. And then like the sad music started playing. You know how it is. Sad music starts playing, and it's like, oh my god, no, they're gonna kill Owen Wilson. And then sure enough, man, just bam, they pruned him. And I felt so bad because I was like, no, Owen, I always wanted to see you on the jet ski, man. Like, hopefully at the end we can see him on the jet ski, right? Just kind of living his best life or whatever it is. But it's so cool, man, because people are finally being woken up to what's actually going on. I like that it's all kind of falling apart. B-15 and Owen Wilson and all these people are starting to realize, okay, so like we really have been kidnapped by the TVA, which leads me to believe I don't think they're all variants. Variants are people who deviate from the existing timeline and in turn are brought into the TVA. But what was it that Owen Wilson was doing that he deviated from the timeline, right? I mean, seemingly the only way to deviate from the existing timeline is to have the ability to alter time, right? So if it's all a pre-guaranteed outcome, then what could Owen Wilson have possibly done? Did he stumble across a time machine, right? Did he stumble across Dr. Doom's time platform? Is his real name Owen Reese? I have no idea what the deal is with his character, right? But regardless of the situation, I don't think they're all variants. I think a lot of them are just innocent people who've just been snatched up by the TVA and just thrown in there and then just told, you've always worked here. That's basically it. But regardless of the situation, it was amazing, man. Like, when he came out and he died, it was like, wow, it tugged at the heartstrings in the most powerful moment. The same thing with Loki, man. I never saw it coming with Loki getting pruned. Not in a million years. I never, ever saw that coming. And I will say this, the more I look at Renslayer, the more I think she may not actually be a villain. She knows what she's supposed to do. She knows what her role is. And it almost seems like she's conflicted between her loyalty to the TVA and what her role describes and the hard decisions she has to make and, like, what's actually going on. But it could also be one of these things where she knows that they're not all created by the TVA. Like, she knows that they're variants, whatever they want to call them, that, like, they all had lives before and they were snatched up and brought in.
not working?
She knows what's going on, but at the end of the day, it's one of those things where it's like, but it's for the greater good. So like, yeah, it sucks that I have to do it, but I'll do it nonetheless. She doesn't strike me as a villain. She strikes me as a prick, but she doesn't strike me as a villain. So, in any event, I think it's kind of it's a wild thing, right? So let's talk
Alright,
about
I guess I'll just have to go with this one.
and let's talk about that post-credit scene. So here's the thing: the timekeepers, as soon as they walked into that room and you saw the timekeeper sitting there, I was like, oh my god, man, maybe it really isn't Miss Minutes, you know? Like maybe it really is the timekeepers are actually alive. Like they really are there and they do exist and they're overseeing all that stuff. I had to turn on subtitles, man. I could understand a damn thing those guys were saying, man. I was like, okay, let's turn on subtitles. What's going on here? Like it was a cool little tidbit there. But like as soon as one of them was decapitated and you found out it was a robot, I was like, Miss Minutes, man, Miss Minutes, one behind dog. That theory came right back. I don't, you know, honestly, here's the thing about theory crafting. I don't care if I'm right or wrong. I just like having fun with it. That's the important thing, guys. Just have fun. Don't focus on whether or not you're right or wrong. It doesn't really matter if you are. It's just a TV show, but it's a cool thing, right? It's a cool little thing. So this post-credit scene, right? This post-credit scene is pretty wild because this really begs a lot of questions. One, it looks like they've been capturing Lokis for quite some time. Those are the only three that we saw, right? You saw Boastful Loki, who is most likely like Red Norvell, or Loki from like Earth 691. He's one of those versions of Loki out there. Probably the one just ended up becoming worthy of lifting Mjolnir, and that's basically it. The hammer he has looks like it was built. So maybe it's just like that Ultimate Universe version of Loki that basically uses like the Ultimate Universe version of Thor's hammer. They don't look exactly the same, and in fact, that hammer looks starkly different from the one from the Ultimate Universe. But at the end of the day, that one looks like it was manufactured, and the one in the Ultimate Universe was basically built in Marvel Comics. But regardless, you've also got Kid Loki. Kid Loki's cool, man. Alright, so at the time I recorded this video, on Comics Explained, I'm gonna have like a 20 to 25 minute long explanation video on Kid Loki. But here's a quick little dirty breakdown of his character, right? So what you have is a story called Siege on Asgard. And the quick little explanation here is that Asgard was basically rebuilt in Glowczewski, Oklahoma by Thor after the events of Ragnarok, when Thor and all the Asgardians and Asgard were destroyed, when he basically destroyed the World Tree. And so when Loki came back after taking over the body of Lady Sif and becoming Lady Loki, he basically believed that like Asgard was too good for humanity and it should exist in its own dimension. So he allied himself with Norman Osborn, who was the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., who basically rebranded S.H.I.E.L.D. into Hammer, and then launched an attack on Asgard in the hopes that the Asgardians would say, okay, fine, Earth's too primitive, whatever, we're not staying here, we're going to go back home again. The exact opposite happened. Instead, crazy things popped off, Asgard was totally destroyed, and Loki was killed. Loki actually made a deal with Hela to have his name removed from the books of Hell, basically meaning that when he died, he would just be resurrected. And he came back in the form of Kid Loki, but with no memory of his own past. He had no idea who he was, didn't know that he was the god of mischief or anything like that. He was a completely total clean slate. So that's kind of the origin of Kid Loki, broken down in, what, maybe like 2 minutes or something along those lines. Then you got Classic Loki, right? Who's played by Richard E. Grant. Classic Loki was awesome. But what did they basically tell Loki?
Alright. And that is going to be it for this one. We got to be like a 2.5 hour stream, right? Yeah, just about. And yeah, man, I really dig this one. This is actually one of my favorites, and I was actually kind of thinking as I was working on these, I was like, oh shit, I was supposed to give him the black leather mask when he's here, not the brown leather mask. So we at least got one with him in a black leather mask, and you could see immediately how much cooler this one looks. And the reason why it works better is against his skin tone. See, the brown leather is, you know, pretty damn close. So, you know, when I green it up, it, you know, starts to differentiate itself from the reds on his skin tone. But, you know, you can see like there's like similarities. So as I've been working on this, I've been like, ah, shit. So it's kind of cool to see one with the black leather like I've been wanting to do for I don't know how long now. So I'm glad I got this one in. That's going to be the takeaway from this. But also it's just a super cool picture of this one. I like to see him looking silly and goofy and happy. I'm really digging his character. I hope everyone watching this, I hope you guys are enjoying these and digging this as well. And can see, you know, just in like here alone, like the differences that you can get with lighting, skin tone, and then, you know, different color leathers and things like that. But either way, man, this was a ton of fun, man. I enjoyed this one, so hopefully you did as well. Um, and yeah, that's gonna be the end of this one. I'm G Mr. Drew. It's at G Mr. Drew on all social media. You can follow, like, and subscribe. Links are in the bio, along with the link to my website, gmrdrew.art. Go check it out. Everything and anything that I be doing in here winds up in there eventually. There's merch links to all my socials. You can contact me through there. And yeah, man, if you dig what you're seeing here and you like what I do, and you'd like to commission me for a character portrait of your choosing, whether it's an original character of yours or a just one that you're a fan of, think of it as a sketch commission from a convention. You can find me on Fiverr and Patreon. If you just want to support me at all, there's a dollar tier, but starting at $3 a month, you can get a character commission, and then it goes up from there. And basically, the larger the commission you want, the higher the tier. And that's basically how it works. But either way, man, this one was dope. This one was a lot of fun. I want to thank everyone for watching. If you make it this far into these videos, I know they might be a drag sometimes. Hopefully not, but I understand. I've been trying to think of ways to try to pass the time a little bit more, nicer for you guys. Either way, I want to thank you all. I love you all. Peace.